Greetings and welcome back to Smartwatch Ticks. A lot of you have been interested in these ECG and PPG fitness bands, but prefer a watch. Well, today you're in luck because we're going to unbox the CK12. It's an actual ECG-capable fitness watch, and it looks like this. It's right inside of here. And it's a sweet little thing with metal all the way around that forms one of the electrodes, the plates that you need to complete the three-plate circuit. So before we unbox, let's talk about this. The KALOAD CK12 from Banggood is like we said, an ECG heart rate monitoring blood pressure reading device for under $40, and it's available by clicking the link in the show notes. Head on over there. This is what it has inside of it. It's a basically small 180 milliamp hour battery, but these things don't use that much, so you get good 10 days working time and a standby for a whole month. It's fully waterproof. Look at that, IP67. You can swim with this one. It does blood pressure, heart rate, ECG like we mentioned, and it's using the standard apps that we're familiar with. So looks like a pretty interesting deal. What else have we got in here? There's a little box. When we open this one up, we have a user's manual and a bag. Inside the bag is, yes, the charging unit. And again, like a lot of these, it's a rather unique two-connector charger, although we're starting to see this style becoming standard, like the 4-pin connector on the smartwatches, the Android watches in particular. This 2-pin connector, because all you need is battery on these, is starting to show up as almost a universal connector with the magnets. Nope, doesn't go that way. Goes that way. Good solid connection. We have the optical sensor in the middle, the metal plates on the back here. It's a TPU type of a stretchable band. Definitely you can swim with this. We have a cover on it. Let's peel that off. Wow. That's completely opaque cover because the thing is on. Look at that. It just lit up for us. How do we get it to go on? I have no idea. We'll have to check the manual. There we go. Okay, it's got a time, but it's not the right time. Nope, don't know how. Oh, okay, we swipe down. There we go. That's how we cycle through everything. There's our ECG, and it's flashing back here for heart rate. Wow, blood pressure, temperature, cool. Messages, if you have any. Find your phone. And information about the device and the power off button. So let's look at the manual, then we'll tether it and check it out. Chinese on one side, English on the other. Here we go. CK12 Smart Fitness Bracelet. And it's got a QR code that says you scan that and you can go for Fit Live, which is one of the multiple apps that this will support. You see here it's the heart one. We've used that one before too. We'll just pick one and tether it for you. Here's how to do the measurements. And again, they want you to be, still and careful. You're going to squeeze or hold the sides of the metal band. And the other two electrodes are touching your skin, and that's how you get the connectivity. We've seen them with one button at the bottom, two buttons at the bottom, one button in the back, or one plate in the back, two in the back. As long as you follow the procedures for the device, you're pretty much going to get a good reading. And warranty and reminders. All right. That's it in the box. Right. Oh, there's another little card, a quality assurance little thing. And another little separator. That's about it. So, what does it say on the card? Remember. A reminder. Interesting, huh? You want to be following these guidelines to make sure you get a good reading using your ECG technology. Not bad for all of the bands. I may keep this around and just show it every time we review one of these things that supports ECG. Okay, let's get everything out of here. Let's get it tethered up and let's try it out. Woohoo! Now, as I mentioned before, there's several different apps. There's actually about 4 of them that will tether to this particular band, all by the same company. 2 of them are shown here. One is Fit Live and the other is Wear Heart. Now, when you download and install the Fit Live app, and I've done this is actually tethered to a different watch, and I go to ECG analysis, and I pick up one of them that I've done. I know, I'm jumping real fast. I'll get back to the original stuff in a moment. I want to show you that here you can have a health report, but there's nothing right here. And when I do the health report, it generates my ECG, and that's the data from before on that band that was collected back on December the 4th. All fine and dandy, right? We've seen all that before. However, now, if I go into the Wear Heart, which is connected to this CK12, and ask me to do an update, which I did, and once again, I'm back here on the same page. In the health section, I go into the ECG, and here's one that I just produced for you. And watch this. I not only get the health report, which we've seen is the ECG chart, just like before on the other one, but I have this new detail report. And when you come in here, check this out. I've got a fatigue index, physical and mental load, physical fitness, and cardiac functions with an overall report. Now, up until now, we only had that. We didn't have any of this. The good news is this is app related. It means any of these ECG+PPG devices like the T6 that we've already looked at will, I hope, be able to tether to this particular app and now have access to the detailed report. And I bet you we're going to see the updates to the other ones that's going to include that feature as well. Pretty cool. All right, let's jump back in here, go back to the very beginning, and this is what it would look like if you opened up the app as tethered to the watch. You get your opening pages. I've done a whole 208 steps walking around with this. Your sleep is here, and your Ppg heart rate is here. And you can get to that by going in here and seeing, I've only got one reading, but it would tell you over time, and you can have it set, as you'll see in the settings, to do it every hour. It will give you your average and so forth. A lot more detail on this app and everything we're looking at in like the T6 review. We've gone over it so many times, I'm just going to move quickly through it. This is your overview. Your sleep time would show you all of your sleep quality by day, week, or month, and you could go through by day if you wanted to, and your total fitness information with mileage, calories burned, and completion against your goal is shown here for day, week, and month as well. Got it? Good. Okay. Now, if I go here to health, this is where we get into the whole ECG thing. You do a calibration with it on your arm, and once you've got it calibrated, you can then go through and do a measurement, and it'll give you your ECG heart rate, blood pressure, and then your overall analysis. When you go in here, all of them that you've done, it will show you specifically just the heart rate, okay, and the time that it was taken. So if you want to review that, or your blood pressure from ECG, you can do that. Or again, you go in here and you can look at your overall complete report, which doesn't tell you your blood pressure, mind you. When you look at it, it's telling you your heart rate right here, and it's telling you your detail report right here. But to get your blood pressure, you got to go in here. Interesting, it's all separated, but there it is. When you tap on it, you get the same chart that just is a information chart that shows you what ideal is and what your zones are and date and time and your actual reading. We'll do one of those when I'm just about done with this. Care is where you go in if you've got friends set up, relatives, the person's, your whatever, your grandfather's, whoever's reading can show up and be shared with friends. And then mine is where you have the bracelet tethering. It's connected right now. You have your overall user settings. I've just left them at default. You can change all of those settings, of course. You can go in and adjust your overall target, suggesting 8 to 10,000, but you can do them in 1,000 increments. You have your sleep target of how many hours, but not beginning and ending time, just your basic target. Then your device management. Here's where you can turn on or off the hourly heart rate monitoring, which is the PPG. That's the light diode, not the ECG with the touching the plates, because you have to be physically present for all of that. Lift your wrist to brighten the screen. Turn the wrist to brighten the screen. These seem different, and what I found was one of them, and I'm not sure which, I think it's the turn the wrist one, will actually advance to the next thing on the menu, it appears. So that's a little, you got to play with that. You can set your reminders. You have more reminders that you can set. If you want to find President Trump's tweet at the moment he does it, push to your watch. You can go for it if you've got him linked in on your Twitter. Alarm clock settings, again, 12 or 24-hour time, metric or imperial. You can reset everything, and you can check for the latest firmware. And that's in the device management. So let's go back to health. I'm going to put the band on, and then we're going to, we're going to calibrate and do a measurement. Oh, just to show you, look, I have an SMS message. It just says message not down, and I'm pretty sure it means downloaded, because I had an image that came through and it was not working. And sliding up is how you get to cycle through all of your items on here. And way back there, you saw the SMS messages, 2 of them, press and hold. There's 1 of them. Press and hold again, I don't know. Nope, takes you back out of it. So I think you only see a part of the first message. With that said, here we are. We're going to do calibration real quick. Precise value. You can put in your systolic and diastolic as known by your doctor and you, what your typical measurements are. If you typically have high blood pressure, 160 over 100 or whatever, put that there so that it'll calibrate the band, the watch, to match up with who you are. Defaults are 120 over 80. I confirmed that. Tells me I'm going to go through and do these measurements and that I should be quiet and have it at the right height and all that stuff. Confirm that. Now we're in the page. This is calibration only. I say start measurement. And I found that the best for me is just to hold 1 finger on the bottom plate. In the picture, it shows 2 fingers on the side. And that gives you kind of a strange reading. In fact, right now I'm getting a bit of a strange reading. See, I'm getting double peaks instead of single. Interesting. Well, let's let it go at 7 seconds and see what it says. Down at the bottom, it's getting the PPG, the optical chart as well. Okay, measure calibration succeeded. I'm going to mess around with this measurement now and show you as we go through here and do the same thing and start the measurement. I'm going to try holding it on both sides and look at the chart. Okay, now I'm going to take it off and I'm going to put my finger on the front. Looks like I'm getting the same, and I'm getting double peaks, which is really bizarre. I haven't seen that before. I'm going to touch the top and bottom. All right, no matter what way I do it, I seem to be getting bogus information because I was messing around with it too much, but just so we can see what it looks like, we can confirm that. I can start measuring and do a legitimate one now. I lick the tip of my finger, going to make it a little bit wet, and I'm going to press lightly and hold here and see what it'll do with a carefully done reading. Yeah, very unusual and different than what I've seen before. Usually there's just 1 peak. I don't know what you call these. I know they got technical words and stuff for them, but we'll take a look at the playback on this in 5 seconds and see what it generated. All right. Wow. 96/61. I don't think it's heart rate 34. I don't think it's working right for right now for some reason. You should wet your arm. You should be a little damp on your finger, and all of that stuff is kind of critical. Now I'm going to go back to sport. I'm going to refresh it so that I can transfer that data here, come back over here and go into the analysis. And it's saying heart rate too slow. And this is what it looked like. Yeah, looks really strange. Now you can't expand this, but if I share it by PDF, it'll generate a PDF and I can actually send it out. This is the one that I did earlier, and that is kind of typical to what you normally see. So it's a little shy for the video. I'm not sure what's going on, but you see how the process works, how you get yourself some actual ECG data, and the fact that you can generate a PDF, which I then emailed to myself and sent off to the printer. And of course, on a screen, you could pinch and zoom all you want to. Or, as you know, you could just make a screenshot of what's here and you can zoom from your screenshot. Any which way you do it, it'll work. So that's what we're looking at when we're looking at the new updated app, the WearHeart app, tethered to our CK12, which is an ECG+PPG watch, not band. And it's got basically the same functions that you've seen us cover in 2 or 3 of the other bands, all using the same app. But now the app's got that detailed report. So once again, you can tap it to turn it on. You slide down to go through your steps, calories burned, distance walked, your ECG. Now you can take it right from the watch. If everything works right, it'll store it in memory and transfer it to your phone later. But only the last one. Don't do 2 or 3 of these when you're out. Just do one of them. Went through all of that and lost it. Okay, here's your actual Ppg heart rate now. And it's pulled in a 34 from somewhere. If I just leave it here, it's going to actually now, using the laser diode, not laser, but the diode, the green diode in the back, to do the capillary measurement. It's going to come back with a heart rate. And after it assesses that for a little while, comes up with a nice average, it vibrates, which it just did, and it's recorded that, which later will be transferred to the app. Lost it again. All right. Unfortunately, it only goes down. It doesn't go... Wait, it does go up. Oh my gosh, okay. Well, I could have gotten to it faster. Nice, we can try that, huh? Down and up works. Blood pressure. Then there's temperature in degrees centigrade of your arm. Then after that is your messages. We showed you that. Finally, you'll find your phone and then the information about the watch that you can then, I believe, press and hold. Goes back to our time. Okay, well, that's an overview of how the watch works, how the app works, and where you can get it. Exactly, Banggood, the CK12. Check it out in the show notes, spying link for you. It's a fitness band in a watch format. It's got the basic same display as we've seen in a couple of the other bands, only a much nicer looking platform. And it works really well with all of these different apps, and in particular, as you now know, update the WearHeart app and you get a new special report. These others may be available soon for update as well, but definitely I'd gravitate to that one, the WearFit. You've been watching Smartwatch Ticks. Appreciate your subscription. That's the eclipse rising, setting over the Atlantic Ocean. See the little boat there? Love that background. See you again soon, okay? So what is all this ECG and PPG and PWTT stuff anyway? And why do we care? Well, we're going to explain that in this little section. And if you're watching it, it means you've just watched a video about an ECG+PPG sensor fitness band or watch. Because I'm going to tack this section at the end of every single one of those, since it's new technology and I know you guys aren't watching all of them. If you've seen this segment before, you can bail out of the video because it's a repeat. If you haven't seen it, you might want to listen to understand about the band or watch you're considering purchasing. I'm going to read through it with you. First of all, take a look at these pictures. You know, in the medical community, they can hook you up to a biomedical device that creates this whole heart wave chart labeled with A, B, C, D, E, and all these different areas and heights and things that the medical folks know how to read. It's a medical equipment device, and it's relatively expensive, although you can probably rent them for the time you need them if you have issues related to your heart. You have electrodes that go on your body, and they pick up a signal that gets recorded through the electronics in the device. Well, the electrocardioelectric monitor is a bioelectricity that's generated from each of the heart sections beating by a pacemaker, atrium, and ventricular. Yes, ECG data is calculated from the changes of it. You're going to find that this is kind of Chinese English as we read it as well, so I hope we can both figure out what they're actually saying, because the sentence structure isn't perfect. What they're looking at is taking this concept and shoving it into this device on your wrist with 3 electrodes. 2 are usually on the bottom, and the third one is something that you touch on the side without letting your left and right arms make contact, okay, so that the signal that's being picked up by those electrodes will come from or pass through your heart. From the bottom electrodes and separately from the top electrodes down both arms. According to the principle of medical testings, you put a finger on the electrode plate of, in this case it's the T6, one of the watch bands we're reviewing, but any of them that are designed this way, while wear on wrist to produce bioelectricity through the body's circulation to detect the data generated. The goal is to get a relative chart similar to this one that comes from this. Now we're going to find out why you need that. First, we have to do some definitions. The definition of ECG is electrocardiography, and there's ECG sensors that measure the biopotential generated by electric signals that control the expansion and contraction of the heart chambers. PPG is what we're used to seeing for getting your heart rate on smartwatches and smartbands. PPG, here we go, is plethysmography. Photoplethysmography.
Photoplethysmography. Photoplethysmography.
Sensors. Don't do that with a mouthful of jelly beans. These use a light-based technology to sense the rate of blood flow as controlled by the heart's pumping action. Those are the little green lights you see on the bottom of your watch. And that's what we've typically used to come up with your heart rate, your pulse. And I guess in the sort of newer technology, it's been used to create your analysis of your blood pressure and your blood oxygen. But we'll continue on that one because we still haven't been able to fully test the accuracy of the PPG by itself. What's really cool and what's new with these devices is the blend, the combination of the ECG and the PPG for a PWTT that lets you come up with a better accuracy of all of your biometrics. Okay, comparative questions. Let's run through these. It tells you the difference between the two so you can better understand them. How is heart activity measured? ECG sensors directly use electric signals produced by the heart activity, while PPG sensors use electrical signals derived from light reflected due to the changes in blood flow during heart activity. I kind of got that from the definitions, right? Well, which is most accurate? ECG is a reference standard signal that is used for monitoring cardio health and wellness by healthcare providers. PPG sensors, on the other hand, typically use ECG signals as a reference for static heart rate comparison. kind of saying that ECG is sort of the standard that is used by healthcare providers, and the optical method is measured against the static for comparison to see how accurate they are. Hint, ECG sounds like it's more accurate. Can heart rate, HR, be measured? Heart rate is the same as pulse. With ECG, HR can be measured accurately. HR can be measured with PPG, however, it is only suitable for average or moving average measurements. That's why it's kind of difficult to tell when you're getting your heart rate on your current watch if it's real or not. It's an average. So if you're sprinting and checking your heart rate at the end of the sprint, it may be reading lower than it actually is because it's doing an average, or what's called a moving average, which means throwing away the oldest data and, say, taking the last 5 or 10 measurements and averaging all of those as it moves forward in time. That's the moving average. Okay, can heart rate variability, oh my gosh, here's another term. What in the world is that? Can it be measured? HRV can be readily derived from ECG data as R peak intervals can be extracted. Wake up! HRV, come on, hang in there. Can be heart rate variability is the how much variance there is between heart rates. Let's say you're at 60 beats per minute. Well, what if you got 60, 63, 58, 60? That's the heart rate variability. Correct me if I'm wrong, any medical providers. I'm not a doctor. I don't pretend to really know this stuff. I'm just working my way through it like the rest of us here. Heart rate variability, can you measure that? And apparently a measure of the heart rate variability gives you an indicator of your level of stress. If you're calm, if you're zenning, if you're doing mindfulness, it should be regular. Okay, your HRV should be regular. If it's static and changing, it could mean you're under stress. So that's the watches and devices that tell you your stress level. That's probably what they're attempting to give you is the HRV, which apparently is really hard from the PPG because that's a moving or static average, right? And doesn't really take into account the variability. We move on. HRV can be readily derived, however, from the ECG data as R peak intervals can be extracted with millisecond accuracy. R peak, I think, is that little beep, beep, you know, the little sound you see in the TV shows before you go flatline, right? Beep, the little beep, beep, that's the R peak. And you can measure that with millisecond accuracy, which means you can really tell the time difference between those peaks, right? So that meaningful HRV data can be obtained with short duration measurements, usually like 30 seconds or so, which is typically what you get in the chart that comes from the transmission of this data from your device to your app in your watch, in your phone, that you could extract and send out to your healthcare provider. With PPG sensors, peak interval accuracy is limited by usable sampling rate due to the high power consumption of the LEDs. With PPG, pulse rate variation correlates with HRV, right? With PPG, this is the light diode kind of thing, PRV, pulse rate variation, correlates with the heart rate variation for longer periods of measurement, over 5 minutes, but not for short duration measurements because it's doing a moving average. Only if the moving average starts to change dramatically, which you can only get over a long period of time, in a sense you're looking at the average of the averages, or the standard deviation from the average of the averages, will you find that you have stress or not by trying to use the PPG diode technology to get pulse rate variation. That's too long to go, by goodness. By then, if you sat for 5 minutes, you would have calmed yourself down. You wouldn't need this. Maybe that's what they're trying to get you to do. Breathe. How long does it take to take a reading? Well, ECG sensors don't require long settling times. You hook it up and it goes, right? Stat clear. So, meaningful readings can be obtained very shortly after startup. PPG sensors require a relatively long setting time due to the need for, you ready? Measuring the amount of ambient light and calculating the compensation needed for canceling its effect. Are you taking your pulse in the dark, in the sunlight? Are you moving? Are you moving in and out of shadow? And all that ambient light has to be added or subtracted correctly to the tiny variation that the light diodes are getting back from in the sensors that represents the blood movement through your capillaries. It's really tricky. And they got big old algorithms to try to cancel out the effects of ambient light. But nonetheless, it can't really start giving you a good measurement, which is why you don't see it right away on your watch, until it's measured the ambient light and compensated for it. Whereas the ECG, boom, it's right there. PPG sensors may also require compensation of motion artifacts to produce a reading. Come on, common sense. If you want the thing to work, you're going to have to hold really, really still when you have the optical sensor reading your pulse. If you move a little bit, your capillaries are moving underneath, and it's just going to throw everything off. You found that out. And that's why oftentimes we think that these things are not accurate. Well, they're partially accurate as we're learning, and they're not accurate because you're not standing still and your ambient light is changing. Fix those conditions, and your current watch will be more accurate. There, you learned something, making it worthwhile watching this whole silly thing, right? All right, wait, there's more. Here we go. Which has the lowest power consumption? We need to know that for these darn low battery watches and bands, right? NeuroSky's BDM101 ECG sensor features extremely low power consumption, operating at 2.5 milliwatts. Most PPG sensors require approximately 30 milliwatts of operating power. Well, as you know, that's really not all that much, either of those, in comparison to cellular radio or GPS. So you're not like really draining your battery unless you have it on continuously monitoring your heart rate, probably with either sensors, but for sure with the optical. Which is the smallest footprint? Well, the BDM101 ECG, you think this is a sales sheet for the BDM101? Probably is. It's the world's smallest ECG sensor at only 3mm by 3mm with no additional components required. PPG sensors featured a relatively large PCB footprint. That's not the PCBs that are toxic. I have no idea what it is, but I don't. Hopefully it's not. Oh my gosh, if we're running around with PCBs on our wrist. It's a big package, typically 6x6, which is like 9 times bigger, right? Or 4 times bigger. Plus additional PCB area for the microcontroller unit, battery management crystal, LED circuits, and don't forget the little wire that, has to hook it all up. A lot of stuff going in there. It's a big footprint. In a small package, it takes up more space. What they're not mentioning, though, is remember, you got to have electrodes. And so it doesn't take up a lot of space, but there's 2 plates on the bottom and 1 on the side or the front that have to be touched. So that's all part of the ECG circuit. But the little goodie itself that figures it all out is a tiny little thing on the ECGs. Is any external equipment required to produce a reading? Well, on this fancy BMD101 sensor features on-chip HR measurements, so no external equipment is required. In contrast, the PPG sensor does require external microcontroller unit for HR calculation. This is all in one. This one has the little separate diode thing, and that's why you got that cable inside if you take your watch back off that hooks it into the main circuit board, because it's got to hook up to a chip to read and understand what that optical sensor is picking up. How easy is it to integrate with a device? The BDM101 ECG sensor features an SDK, Android, iOS for easy app development and integration, which is, folks, why we're now able to get this stuff on these smart devices. So far, it's in bands. As you know, if you're watching this video, you just probably saw a review on a fitness band that has ECG capability, but it's going to come to watches. You mark my words. By 2018, we're going to start seeing ECG PPG integration on watches as well. Why not? It's small. It's just a matter of isolating the case and putting electrodes on the back and someplace to touch on the watch to get the electrical hookup. The sensor features an SDK, which is sort of like an APK. After you put the SDK in the APK, you got an app that you can use, right, for easy app development and integration. PPG sensors require an MCU firmware up development and integration in addition to host platform app development and integration, which is why we've seen a lot of the different watches, more or less accurate or not, around the optical sensor stuff, because the sensor unit itself is just spitting out the data. It's all up to the MCU firmware that interprets all of that stuff to give you accurate or not so accurate heart rate or pulse data. Okay? I guess we should be saying pulse data when you're talking about optical and heart rate data when you're talking about electrical. Get the terminology right. When it comes to key considerations like size, power consumption, accuracy, ease of integration, and richness of data, ECG biosensors present a clear advantage over their PPG counterparts for heart rate monitoring. But it's just now hitting the market in our tiny little watches and bands. ECG biosensors are capable of delivering the widest range of heart health metrics because they are able to capture more comprehensive signals of overall heart performance, including both heart rate and heart rate variability. Now, up until now, all of this, we are talking about your pulse rate, your heart rate. Nothing yet about blood pressure or blood oxygen, two other measurements that the medical community uses and fitness zealots use to understand their body dynamics. Let's move on. That brings us to pulse wave transit time, PWTT, and its relationship with systolic blood pressure. How do you take the stuff that we're getting from the heart wave and the biometric optical sensor, all right, the ECG signal and the PPG signal? How do you mess around with that in order to come up with blood pressure in relationship to your actual systolic blood pressure to get accurate readings? Well, this paper talks about all of that. And I'm going to put it on the screen and let you read it. Maybe we'll jump into a little bit of it, but and I'll also have the reference to it in the show notes down below. And hopefully you can just freeze your screen right now and read this. I'll give you some overall, well, let's look at the abstract to get the premise of where it's coming from. It says that blood pressure is one important parameter in assessing a patient's or your own health status and fitness and so forth. The measurement of blood pressure using conventional method is less practical in monitoring continuous blood pressure. This paper proposes an automatic technique for monitoring blood pressure continuously using the relation of the pulse wave transit time with the systolic blood pressure. The measurement of PWTT involves the marking of electrocardiograph R, the ECG R peak, from electrocardiograph signal, and the peak of peripheral pulse wave from the PPG signal. Okay? That's the optical and the electrical. Data collection involves 3 different sessions, which are resting period, exercise period, and recovery period, thus establishing the relationship between SBP and PWTT. The results of monitoring blood pressure based on pulse wave transit time will facilitate personal healthcare monitoring blood pressure continuously. And that's why I do deep breathing exercises. Okay, introduction gives you some of the background, basically what the PWTT really is. And then we come back up here to column 2, and it continues with that chart. And you can kind of see that what they're doing is measuring the time. This is against time, the time between the peak that is seen on the ECG and the bump that you see on the optical PPG. This is your systolic You hear my roosters? Love it. This is the optical bump that is used to compute your pulse rate with the optical sensor. And this is the really fine, detailed microsecond accuracy of the ECG. Getting both those signals coming in out of your body at once and analyzed can let them compute your PWTT. And this whole paper is based on using that PWTT with your systolic blood pressure to get biometric data that's more accurate for you and your body. So it goes through in this particular paper and talks about setting up an experiment or two. And now we get really technical. So we'll just let this parse itself on the screen. Shows you a pulse circuit. This is the philosophy and technique behind doing this whole thing. And obviously, they've managed to miniaturize all of this electronics down to where it now fits in these little fitness bands. Okay, and then they go on to do a second experiment. And this is just the first 2 pages of the whole article, because you got to buy the whole article. This is what they give you for free. You'll see the link down below. If you're really interested in this, you can dive further. So we've moved on from ECG and PPG measurements to determine the pulse wave transit time. From that, and using specialized circuitry, we can analyze the signal difference to get the PWTT and work with it. So we're talking about an electroplate type blood pressure bracelet that's based on the principle of PWTT to measure blood pressure. You got the blood pressure reading, the ECG test plus PPG, and heart rate. Those are kind of the 3 things that are going on now in this new family of devices. The PWTT principle, trying again to talk about it in so many different ways it makes sense. Pulse wave transmission speed and blood pressure is directly related to high blood pressure. Pulse transmission fast, otherwise slow. I love Chinese English. Through the ECG signal and the pulse wave signal, PPG can be obtained pulse wave transmission speed, PWTT, plus wave transmission time. It's actually pulse wave. I'm not going to let the Chinese errors slip through, but their own unique languaging is okay. We can figure it out. Anyway, the pulse, the ECG and the PPG signaling can get you the PWTT, and then from that calculate the blood pressure value. So once again, this is the ECG signal that you see, and a certain point in time can be registered when it finds that peak. This is the optical thing coming through, and at a certain time it can determine that bump in your capillary response back to the sensor, and it can measure the time difference between these two on your arm. With that time difference, it can then go and calculate your blood pressure. When testing the ECG, the right hand on the metal body on the bracelet, do not touch the left arm like that, okay? You can't rest your finger against it. You can't rest your thumb. That's why most of them have a button on the front. See, here's the electrodes on the back and the other electrodes on the side that you squeeze. Some of them have it on the front, much easier, but some have it on the side. Either way could work, as long as it bridges your heart. The 2 electrodes at the bottom of the hand ring are in full contact with the left hand. The 3 parts will form an electric circuit, and combined with the green photoelectric sensor test result, calculate the blood pressure data. All right, we're almost done. One more document I wanted to go through. Oh, gosh. Yeah, it's long, but it really lays the total foundation for this. So if you're in school, especially if you're studying medical or health, you might want to write a theme paper on this. I think you could get an A. Mr. Tix will help you with this. I'm not going to answer a lot of questions. I don't know much more than what I'm showing you, but I mean, this is good stuff. You guys should seriously think about writing a dissertation. Well, at least a homework paper. The emergence of mobile technology advances in these biosensors are promising to change the conventional healthcare system to facilitate systems that provide for mobile and individual-centered healthcare systems. Mobile monitoring systems can provide continuous physiological data and better information regarding the general health of individuals. I love good English. For example, such a mobile cardiac health monitoring system can reduce healthcare costs by disease prevention and enhancement of the quality of life with disease management, i.e., this could be a health preventative device that can be used in wellness by monitoring correctly your bio data and especially being able to get the ECG information, the actual chart, and send that off to your healthcare provider if you have some form of an incident that needs monitoring but happens so quickly they don't have time to hook you up at the doctor's office or get you into the hospital. Something like this might give you that preliminary data that could find something way more than this PWTT thing. I mean, when you look at all of the jiggles on that, they all mean something, and doctors and medical folks know what that is. Cardiologists, valuable. So if it's reliable and if it's accurate, which it's professing that it is because it's actually giving you that electrical hookup directly to your heart, then that data may be really, really valuable. So even if you don't use it for blood pressure and heart rate, the fact that you've got ECG output in the form of a chart that can be made into a PDF that can be emailed is amazing. Accordingly, a mobile device is disclosed that determines the user's cardiac health status by monitoring multiple key cardiovascular parameters and or their index, such as ECG, heart rate, cardiac output, and blood pressure, in a continuous and non-invasive fashion. For example, users can conveniently carry currently handheld mobile devices anywhere and conduct self-monitoring when desired or necessary, all the time or as needed when convenient. And that's what these medical devices often do that you see, stuck on a belt or something like that. They'll measure you 24/7 for 3 weeks, and then they dump all that data at the doctor's office and work with it. We're talking about a little wrist kind of thing that can either give you spontaneous instant measurements over 30 seconds to 2 minutes or actually be able to do continuous measurement. It's storing that data that's the difficult thing. It can certainly generate it, but anyway, we digress. The home fitness bands are going to just basically give you your ECG, heart rate, and blood pressure information. All right, I'm not going to read any more. Let's just let you skim this whole document because it's giving you kind of a background pep talk about why this is good, okay? But we will get in here and says it is commonly accepted that the pulse wave transmit time can be registered as an index of arterial stiffness and has been employed as an indirect estimation of blood pressure. PWTT can be measured at the time as the time interval between the R wave peak of ECG and the pulse wave arrival in the same cardiac cycle. When ECG and pulse wave are simultaneously recorded, that can be derived. PWTT was originally applied to the area blood pressure estimation, and here's a reference for all that. And since then, the researchers have studied the mechanism of the method and on and on. So now you're getting the background that has led up to the science of being able to do this with cuffless blood pressure estimation based on PTTT, pulse transit time techniques, right? It's actually pulse wave, PWTT, so forth and so on. Okay, so bottom line, what we are looking at in these new devices that Mr. Tix is all excited to be bringing you, a bunch of different bands, a bunch of different watches, as this new technology emerges and becomes the de facto standard for, say, 2018 to 2019 in wearable devices. What we're looking at is the science behind how that works and why it is presumed, estimated, anticipated, and hoped to be relatively accurate and usable for collecting biometric data for your fitness and overall health. All right? Thanks for watching this. Really, if you stuck with it the whole way, I applaud you. Hopefully you can use it somehow in your life, and it'll be
valuable to you. In the meantime, you now know what we're talking about when you see something that says it's got ECG plus PPG.